Whenever I walk past a massive construction site, you see the tower cranes spinning, the deep pits, the guys in the high V's vest. I usually just see the physical work.
Right.
I see concrete being poured, steel going up. It looks like chaos, but, organized chaos.
Ideally organized, yes.
But I rarely think about the invisible architecture holding it all together. I don't mean the steel beams. I mean the paperwork.
The legal architecture. It's funny you say that because to the public, a building is bricks and mortar. To the people running the show, the building is actually a stack of contracts.
That is exactly where we're going today. We're doing a deep dive into the rule book that literally shapes the modern world. Because if this rule book is flawed, or if people don't understand it, the skyscraper doesn't just get delayed.
Oh, it's worse than that.
Companies go bankrupt, people get sued, the whole project can collapse without a single brick falling into place.
It sounds dramatic, but it's absolutely true. The contract is the project's DNA. If the DNA is broken, the organism fails.
So today we are tackling the FIDIC Red Book, specifically the 2017 edition. Now, for the uninitiated, FIDIC is essentially the Bible for international construction contracts where the client provides the design.
That's right.
But we aren't reading the whole Bible today. We're zooming in on one specific high-stakes battlefield. Clause 5, subcontracting.
A great choice. Clause 5 is where the rubber meets the road. It's the tension between I won this contract and I need help to actually build it. It's about ego, control, and of course, a lot of money.
So the mission today is to figure out that balance of power. How much can a contractor really delegate? What happens when the client, forces a specific team on you?
And crucially, for anyone who likes getting paid,
Yes.
what happens when the money stops trickling down to the little guy?
It really is a fascinating mix of risk management and just pure power dynamics.
It is.
So let's start with the basics. The Red Book assumes there is a contractor, the entity that won the bid. But let's be real. On a billion-dollar airport project or a massive dam, does that main contractor actually do everything themselves?
Almost never. I mean, in the modern world, construction is hyper-specialized. You have the main contractor, let's call them the general, but they aren't the ones installing the high-tech baggage handling systems or the specialized glazing or the elevators. They need specialists. They need subcontractors.
So if I'm the general and I win the bid because of my shiny reputation, can I just turn around, hire cheaper companies to do 100% of the work, and just sit in my office collecting a margin?
The classic paper contractor scheme. You win the work, then farm it all out and skim the profit. FIDIC Clause 5.1 shuts that down immediately. The text is explicit. The contractor shall not subcontract the whole of the works.
So I have to get my hands dirty. I have to do something.
You do, and it's usually more specific than just don't do nothing. In the contract data, which is the specific form filled out for each project, there's typically a line for total accumulated value. It's a percentage cap.
Like a limit on outsourcing.
Exactly. If that line says 40%, you cannot subcontract more than 40% of the project's value. You effectively have to self-perform the majority of the work.
Why does the client care? I mean, as long as the airport gets built and the planes can land, why does it matter who poured the concrete?
Because the client, the employer, hired you. They vetted your financials, your safety record, your technical staff. If you farm everything out, you've essentially pulled a bait and switch. They don't want to rely on a chain of unknown entities. They want the company they signed the deal with.
That makes sense.
Okay.
It's about retaining the expertise you paid for. But let's look at the risk side of this. If I do hire a subcontractor, legally, within that percentage, and they mess up. Let's say the roofing guy installs the flashing wrong and the terminal leaks. Can I tell the client, look, I hired a specialist, he had a license, go sue him?
Absolutely not. And this is a concept that trips up a lot of people new to this. This is the vicarious liability principle, and Clause 5.1 is ruthless about it. It states that the contractor is responsible for the acts or defaults of any subcontractor. Get this. As if they were the acts or defaults of the contractor.
As if they were my acts. Wow, that is a very specific legal fiction.
It is. To the employer, the subcontractor effectively doesn't exist. There's a privity of contract only between the employer and the contractor. So if the roof leaks, you leaked. If the sub is late, you are late.
So I can't pass the buck.
The buck stops entirely with you. You can try to sue your subcontractor later to get your money back, but as far as the client is concerned, you are the one on the hook. You are the single point of failure.
Okay, if I'm taking on that level of risk, literally treating their mistakes as my own crimes, I surely have total control over who I hire, right? I can't be liable for someone I didn't vet.
Well, yes and no. Under the general rules of Clause 5.1, you have the right to propose them, but you still need a permission slip. The clause says you must obtain the engineer's prior consent for all proposed subcontractors.
The engineer here being the client's representative on site.
Correct. You can't just sneak a new electrical team onto the site over the weekend because they were cheap. You have to submit their details,
Yeah.
name, experience, resources. You have to prove they're up to the task.
Is there a threshold for this? Do I need the engineer's permission to hire the guy who delivers the sandwiches or the bottled water?
Thankfully, there are exceptions. You don't need consent for suppliers of materials, so the concrete delivery or the water truck is fine. And you don't need consent if the subcontractor was already named in the contract documents.
Ah, okay.
But for any new labor or installation teams, you need to ask.
Here is where I see a bottleneck. I've worked on projects, not construction, but corporate stuff, where the administration is. Let's call it sluggish. If I find a great steel erector, and I send the paperwork to the engineer, and they just sit on it. They don't say yes, they don't say no, they just ghost me. Meanwhile, my schedule is burning.
That is the nightmare scenario. Delay is the enemy of profit. But the 2017 Red Book introduced a really sharp mechanism here to stop that administrative paralysis. It's the deemed consent rule.
I love the sound of that. How does it work?
It's a silence is yes mechanism. If the contractor submits all the required details, and that's key, you have to submit everything required, and the engineer does not respond with a specific objection within 14 days, consent is deemed to have been given.
That changes the dynamic completely.
Yeah.
It puts the burden of action on the engineer.
Exactly. It forces them to read their email.
Yeah.
They can't just delay you by doing nothing. If they sleep on it for 2 weeks, you get your sub. It keeps the project momentum alive.
I like that. He keeps the gears turning. But there's another timeline here I saw in the notes. Once I get that consent, either by them saying yes or by the 14 days running out, can the sub start the next morning?
No. You need to fire a warning shot. You have to give a notice to the engineer not less than 28 days before the subcontractor starts work or arrives on site.
28 days. That seems like a lifetime in construction. Why the gap?
It's about site management and safety. The engineer needs to know who is coming through the gates. They need to check safety inductions, logistics, storage space. You can't just have 100 guys show up unannounced and say, where do we put our tools?
Right.
So you get your consent, which can happen in 14 days, but you still have to respect that 28-day notice period before boots hit the ground.
Okay, so that's the standard path. I find a guy, I vet him, I ask permission, I take responsibility. It's stressful, but it's logical. But then I was reading Clause 5.2, Nominated Subcontractors, and the logic seems to get twisted.
This is where the power dynamic shifts from delegation to imposition.
Nominated sounds polite, like Academy Award nominee, but in this context, it essentially means appointed by the boss, right?
Precisely. A nominated subcontractor is one that the employer effectively chooses. Clause 5.2.1 defines this. It's usually someone specified in the original design documents or someone the engineer instructs you to hire later in the project.
Why would a client do that? If they hired me to manage the project, why are they meddling in the hiring?
Usually it's about very specific quality control or long-lead items. Let's say you're building a luxury hotel. The architect has specified a very particular type of hand-blown glass chandelier that only one company in Venice makes.
Okay.
The client doesn't want you shopping around for a cheaper version in China. They want that guy in Venice, so they nominate him. Or maybe it's a security system where the client has a global contract with one vendor. They instruct you, use these guys.
Okay, I get the aesthetic reason or the corporate reason, but let's go back to liability. In Clause 5.1, we established that if the sub messes up, I, the contractor, am liable.
Correct.
So now, the client forces me to hire the Venetian glass guy. If the Venetian glass guy drops the chandelier, am I still liable?
By default, yes.
That seems incredibly unfair. I didn't pick him. I might not even like him. How can I be responsible for a company I was forced to hire?
You have identified the exact tension that Clause 5.2 tries to resolve. It is a forced marriage. You are being told to marry the subcontractor, share your bank account with them, and take the blame for their mistakes.
That sounds like a terrible deal. Surely there is a way out.
There is. It's the right object. Clause 5.2.2. The contractor can say no, but it's not a simple no. It has to be a reasonable objection raised quickly.
How quickly?
We are back to that 14-day window. You must send a notice of objection within 14 days of receiving the instruction to hire them. If you wait too long, you are deemed to have accepted them.
Okay, so speed is key. But what counts as a reasonable objection? I assume I just have a bad feeling of this guy. doesn't count in court.
No, bad vibes is not a valid legal argument. The Red Book gives you 3 very specific shields, 3 categories of objection that the engineer has to respect.
Let's break these down because this feels like the contractor's only defense mechanism. What's the first shield?
The first is competence and resources. That's clause 5.2.2a. You can object if you have reasons to believe the nominated sub doesn't have the competence, financial strength, or resources to do the job.
So if the client says, hire my nephew's company to install the elevators, and I looked them up and they've only ever fixed lawnmowers and have $100 in the bank.
You can validly object. You say, this entity is not capable. You are protecting the integrity of the project, and the client usually has to back down or prove otherwise.
Okay, that's the common sense shield. What's the second one?
The second is indemnity for negligence, clause 5.2.2b. This is the you break it, you buy it clause. You can object if the nominated subcontractor refuses to sign a contract that indemnifies you against their negligence or misuse of goods.
Right, because if they drive a forklift into my scaffolding, I need to know they are paying for it. If they won't promise that in writing, I don't have to hire them.
Exactly. It prevents you from taking on uninsured risk.
And the third, this one seemed the most technical in the notes, back-to-back liability.
Clause 5.2.2c. This is the most complex, but it's vital. Think of the contract liability as like a heavy backpack. The client put this backpack on you, the contractor. You promised the building would last 50 years, the concrete would be a certain grade, and so on.
Okay, I'm wearing the heavy backpack.
When you hire a sub, you need to take some of that weight out of your backpack and put it into theirs. If the client requires a 10-year warranty on the roof, you need the roofer to give you a 10-year warranty.
That's the back-to-back part. It mirrors the obligation.
Yes, but sometimes a nominated subcontractor, especially a powerful one like a specialized tech firm, might say, no, we don't do 10-year warranties. We only do 2 years. Take it or leave it.
And if I accept that, I'm left holding the bag for the other 8 years.
Precisely. You have a gap in your liability coverage. Clause 5.2.2c says that if the sub refuses to undertake obligations that enable you to fulfill your obligations to the client, you can object. You can say, I can't hire them because their contract leaves me exposed.
That is a powerful tool. So let's play this out. I raise the objection. I say, look, the Venetian glass guy is broke, won't indemnify me, and offers no warranty. Does the engineer say, oops, never mind?
And not necessarily. The client might really want those Venetian chandeliers. They can override your objection.
They can force me, even after I prove the guy is a disaster.
They can, but, and this is the beautiful trade-off in FIDIC, they have to sign an indemnity. Meaning the employer agrees to indemnify the contractor against the specific consequences of that matter. Essentially, the client says, we hear your warning, we're ignoring it, and if it blows up in our faces, we will pay for the damage, not you.
Okay, that seems fair. It transfers the risk back to the person making the bad decision. If you want to drive the car with a flat tire, you pay for the tow truck.
Exactly. It aligns authority with responsibility. If the employer wants the authority to pick the team, they have to take the responsibility for the result.
So we've covered the hiring and the risk. Now let's talk about the thing that actually drives the industry. Money.
Clause 5.2.3 and 5.2.4, the payment flow.
In a normal setup, the money flows downhill, right? Client pays contractor, contractor pays sub.
Yes. That is the chain of command.
But we all know the dark side of construction, the cash flow game. The main contractor gets a huge check from the client, but instead of paying the subcontractor immediately, they hold on to it. They use it to fund other jobs, or just to earn interest while the sub is starving for cash.
It's a systemic plague in the industry. Subcontractors often go bust because the main contractor is sitting on their money. It's predatory, really.
So does Clause 5 do anything to stop this? Specifically regarding these nominated subs.
It does. It gives the engineer the power to audit. Under Clause 5.2.4, before the engineer issues a payment certificate to the contractor, they can ask for reasonable evidence that the nominated subcontractor has actually been paid all the amounts due from previous month.
So the engineer says, show me the receipts. Prove you paid the Venetian glass guy before I give you any more cash.
Yes. It blocks the contractor from treating the subcontractor's money as their own personal piggy bank.
What if I have a good reason not to pay them? Maybe they did a terrible job this month. Maybe they broke the chandelier.
You can withhold payment, but you can't just do it silently. You have to satisfy 2 conditions. First, you must give the engineer reasonable evidence that you have a right to withhold, like proof of defective work. And second, you have to prove you actually notified the subcontractor.
So no ghosting. You have to tell them, I'm not paying you, and here's exactly why.
Transparency is mandatory. You can't just leave them guessing.
Okay, but let's look at the worst-case scenario. The contractor is just being a jerk, they have no excuse, the work is fine, they just aren't paying the nominated sub. The engineer asks for evidence, and the contractor has nothing.
Then we enter the nuclear option, direct payment.
This sounds aggressive.
It is highly aggressive. If the contractor fails to pay and fails to explain why, the employer can step in and pay the nominated subcontractor directly.
They bypass the contractor entirely.
They cut them out of the loop. They write a check straight to the sub.
That's great for the sub, but surely the contractor doesn't get to keep the original money too.
No, this is the sting. The engineer issues a notice. They say, we paid your sub $50,000 directly. And then, in the very next payment certificate to the contractor, they deduct that $50,000.
Just like a parent paying their teenager's credit card bill and then docking their allowance.
That is a perfect analogy, and it's humiliating for a professional contractor. It signals that you have lost control of your cash flow and your project management. It damages your reputation with the client.
So the threat of direct payment is almost as effective as the payment itself. It forces the contractor to behave.
Exactly. It keeps the money moving down the chain.
It really feels like this whole document, this FIDIC Red Book, is trying to engineer human behavior. It's trying to stop laziness with the deemed consent rule. It's trying to stop bullying with direct payment. It's trying to stop bad marriages with the right to object.
That is what a good contract does. It anticipates where people will try to cut corners or abuse power, and it puts up guardrails. Clause 5 is a balancing act. It recognizes that mega projects need delegation, you need nominated subs, you need specialists, but it refuses to let that delegation dilute accountability.
The buck stops here. Principle keeps the contractor honest, but the indemnity clauses protect them from being abused by the client.
It's a complex ecosystem. It protects the little guy from the big contractor and the big contractor from the whims of the client.
It makes me realize that on a construction site, the project manager isn't just managing bricks and mortar. They are managing a web of legal liabilities.
And strict timelines. Remember, 14 days to object, 28 days to notify. If you miss those deadlines, the contract assumes you agreed.
Silence is consent. That's the takeaway for me. If you don't speak up, you are locked in.
In construction law, he who sleeps on his rights loses them.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to that direct payment issue. We framed it as justice for the subcontractor. But I've been thinking, if the client starts paying my workers directly, doesn't that fundamentally break the project?
It is a dangerous line to cross.
Right, because money is authority.
It is.
If I'm the site manager and I'm telling the electrical sub what to do, but he knows his check is coming directly from the client, does he still listen to me? Or does he start bypassing me and talking straight to the client?
That is the provocative thought to leave with. When you activate direct payment, you might solve a cash flow problem, but you create a command chain problem. At what point does the contractor stop being a manager and just become a helpless middleman?
If you lose the power to the purse, do you lose the site?
That is the question every employer should ask before they write that check. It creates a divided loyalty that can wreck the project management structure.
Something to chew on next time you see a crane in the skyline. There's a lot more tension up there than meets the eye. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fine print of the FIDI Red Book.
My pleasure. Keep reading the clauses.
See you next time.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.